So the second part we're going to look at is multiplying binomials times binomials. So, example C here. What is the product of 14 and 19? And most of you don't really have a problem with it, but watch the magic on this one here. Actually, I'm going to start with the vertical method and then work backwards. Of course, the vertical method looks something like this. I have 14 times 19. We draw my line, and I put my operation outside there. Now, we do use the distributive property. So remember, the 9 has to multiply that 4. So that 9 multiplies that 4 to get a 36. And then we carry the 3 there. And now the 9 multiplies the 1 to be 9, and we add the 3 to get a 12. So I have 126 there. Always, we either put a 0 here or we just shift our numbers over. And now we take the 1 and we multiply it. Essentially, we distribute the 1 to the 1 and the 4. So 1 times 4 is a 4, and 1 times 1 is a 1. And now we draw my line, and this time we have to combine. Essentially, what we're combining is like terms, because my 1s, my 10s, and my 100s are my like terms. So 6 plus 0, 2 plus 4, and 1 plus 1, and there's my answer, 266. So I'm going to look at a horizontal method, and it looks a little bit different. So watch the craziness on this one. Instead of 14, actually, I'll write 14 to begin with, and a 19. That's 14 times 19. Well, 14 is 10 plus 4, and 19 is 10 plus 9. So watch the magic on this when we do distribution, or the distributive property. So here's what we do. The 10 has to multiply that 10 to get 100. But now the 10 has to distribute also to the 9. So now we get a 90. But what else? Wait, there's more. What does the 4 do? The 4 has to distribute to the 10, and the 4 has to distribute to the 9. So essentially, this is double distribution. The 10 goes to both of those, and the 4 goes to both of those. Now I can start to just combine like terms. 100 plus 90 plus 40, and in the end, I get 266. A downside of this method is I already had 2 arcs to begin with, and now I have 2 more to pay attention to. So if your arcs confuse you, then the grid method is for you. A grid method would look like this. I would write the 10 and the 4, like so, as if they were part of a box there. And then over here, I write the 10 and the 9. And you could put your plus in there if you find it helpful, just so that you know things are positive. Now we ask ourselves the exact same question that we did before. 10 times 10 is 100, so we write 100 inside there. Now, 10 times 9, we write inside this box, so I put a 90 there. This 10 times this 4, I'm going to write inside there to get a 40. And lastly, the 9 times the 4 is the 36. Since all of these are like terms, we add them together. So combine like terms. That means the 10 plus the 90, 100 plus the 90 plus the 40 plus the 36. In the end, we still get 266. The point of showing you this is that you've already been using the methods we're going to teach today. You've already been, especially with this problem, you've been doing distribution. The 9 gets sent to the 4 and the 1 gets sent to the 4 and the 1. We've been doing the double distribution already, or if you prefer the grid method. So let's see what happens here when we simplify an x plus a 4 times an x plus a 9. I'm going to start with the horizontal method, and we write it out exactly like we see it. the x plus the 4 times the x plus the 9. So the first thing I'm going to do here is take that x in the front and I'm going to distribute it to both of those right there. So at first, the x times the x gives me an x squared. And then the x times the 9 gives me a 9x. Now I like to write my next arcs underneath just so that I don't get all this overlap stuff. So now I need to take the 4, the positive 4 more specifically. The positive 4 has to be sent to this x to get a 4x. We multiply. And then the 4 times the 9 is a 36. So what I just did right here was double distribution. Double distribution. Each term in this binomial gets distributed to each term in this binomial. And the same thing would hold true if this were a binomial and this were a trinomial. Now, the last thing, of course, is that we want to simplify by combining like terms. Simplify, and I'm going to say combine like terms as a CLT just to make it a little faster. Notice that these two are the only like terms that we see there. So the x squared comes down. 9x, positive 9x, plus 4x is 13x. And this guy just comes down because it doesn't combine with anything. So we end up with x squared plus 13x plus 36. All right, for you visual learners, the grid method is going to be very, very helpful. Like I said before, extremely helpful to me. All right, so here, because I have a binomial times a binomial, I'm going to do a 2x2 grid. And as stated, you can have the x plus the 4 on top, and you can have the x plus the 9 along the side. The pluses are optional. You don't need those because they can be translated as positive. All right, now remember what goes inside. What goes inside is multiplication. So x times x would give me an x squared. Next, this positive 9 down below and this x on top multiply to be 9x, positive 9x. If you want to write the plus, you may, or you can just write 9x. Next, this x out here and this positive 4 combine, they multiply here to be positive 4x. And lastly, the x and the 4, the 9 and the 4 multiply to be 36 there. Now there's a reason I color coordinated these, because what's going to happen is we need to combine like terms now. Notice that these guys are like terms. X squared is by itself, and this 36 is by itself. In other words, there's no other like terms to combine with. So x squared comes down. The greens here combine. 9x plus 4x is 13x. And the 36 comes down as a positive 36. So don't forget over here to combine like terms. Now let's look at the third method before we give you some practice on this. It doesn't matter which one you put above, the x plus 4 or the x plus 9. It doesn't actually matter. Notice that my x and my multiplication symbol look pretty similar. So I'm putting that multiplication way out so we're not confused. Okay, now what do? I'm going to take this 9, multiply that 4. So you don't need to write these little colors here, but that might help you there. The 36 there, that multiplies there to be a 9x. And since the 36 is a positive, we keep the plus. Now, remember how we, above here, how we shifted over? See that little 0 right there? That shifts things over. That's going to happen here also, but it's going to happen automatically, okay? So watch this. This x has to get sent to that 4, which is a 4x, but I'm not going to write it here because those aren't like terms. So I'm going to write it underneath. I'm going to stack it under the like terms. So 4x matches up with the 9x. And now I'm going to do this. Again, these arrows I wouldn't draw if I were doing this. in real life because it just gets too convoluted. So x times x there is x squared, so I write that way over there. Now we do exactly like we did before, where we add together things. The x squared comes down because it combines with a 0. 9x plus 4x is 13x, and 36 plus 0 is 36. And there we go. So no matter which method, we get the exact same thing. Now, I do want to point out one additional method, which is essentially the horizontal method, but it's an acronym that may help you remember things that need to be multiplied. FOIL means this. The firsts, O is outers, then I means inners, and L means lasts. So let's walk through that with this problem here. If I have x más 4 por x más 9. Okay, what are the firsts? Well, this guy here and this guy here are my first ones, my firsts. So x times x. So the firsts are x times x, which is just x squared. Again, you don't have to write this middle part right here. We're just showing you the things that are multiplying. Okay, now my outers. What are the outers? Well, this is outside, and this is outside. In other words, if we look at this whole thing, these are the extremes. All right, so that just means 9 times x, and we don't even have to write more. We see that there. Okay, now the inners is this 4 times this here, 4 times x. So that's a 4x. And then my lasts are this guy here and this guy here. So we can write that as 9 times 4, and that's a 36. Of course, we combine like terms. We see that these two combine to be a 13x. And so in the end, with all that work, we write this, x squared plus 13x plus 36, and that's my answer. Now, I drew these arcs here, and I did color coordinating and whatnot. But I do want to point out to you that it actually doesn't matter. Notice up here, these arcs look a little bit more. As you can see, this is just a little bit less confusing, feels a little bit more organized than this. So it actually doesn't matter how you draw your little arcs, just in the end, firsts, outers, inners, lasts. So some people will refer to FOIL. I will tend to teach it as a double distribution here. So I'm going to turn the page.